my name is Natalie Rusterholtz, and I'm going to be presenting my food culture presentation. And for my presentation, I've chose to talk about Armenian food, and more specifically, the history and symbolism of lavash bread. So before we get started, I just wanted to give a little bit of background on what Armenia is, where it is, and just like the culture itself. So a little bit of background, here's some maps. The first map on the left is a bigger picture of it. So Armenia is a small country in what's considered the Middle East. It's bordered by Turkey, Iran, Georgia, and Azerbaijan. So as a lot of people know, this is a somewhat violent area at times, but Armenia itself is a fairly peaceful country. It's just surrounded by a lot of violence, unfortunately. And then on the right, I have a little bit of a zoomed in picture. And as you can see, Lake Sivan is like the biggest lake in the area. It's very big, but it's very beautiful. And then in red, in bolded, is Yerevan. This is like the big city, the major capital of the country. And then something cool just to look at, an interesting fact, you can see Azerbaijan, so it's on actually two sides of Armenia. It's on the right at the border at the bottom, and then on the left at the bottom as well. Azerbaijan has taken over a lot of what Armenia used to be. It was actually a much bigger country, as well as Turkey has taken Armenia's land as well, unfortunately, just due to politics in the past, which I can talk about in a little bit. So the history and significance of Armenia, it is a very old country dating back to 1500 to 1200 BC. It's known as a Transcaucasian country in Northwest Asia. This is a common misconception that Armenia is actually in Europe. It's not, it's in Asia. So that's just good to know. And the first time it declared independence was in 1918. It was invaded by Turkey soon after, and that led to what we know as the Armenian Genocide. Unfortunately, this is a genocide that lasted a few years and led to the death of millions of Armenians. They also targeted Greeks, which is why Greek and Armenian culture is very similar. They both went through this very traumatic genocide and shared a lot of culture throughout the time. And after this Armenian genocide, it became a constituent republic of USSR, only to finally gain independence in 1991, so fairly recently. But the country itself has existed for much longer. In fact, it is known as the first country that adopted Christianity. This is something that Armenians are very, very proud of, and Christianity remains the main religion of the country. And I chose to present on Armenia because I myself am Armenian, and I found this culture and cuisine often overlooked, and I would just like to share information on it because I think it's such a beautiful culture and it has such yummy foods that I feel like it's a shame not to talk about more. So in terms of geography and climate, Armenia is considered a fairly mountainous country with a dry climate. As we know, these aren't the best conditions for growing crops or stuff like that, which is unfortunate and has had negative impacts on their food supply. Additionally, Armenia is not the most economically advanced country, so they do rely on a lot of their own crops and whatnot, so the fact that they do have these very dry and mountainous conditions is not ideal. With their dry climate, they do have issues of water loss, so they have adopted a water conservation measure to prevent excessive water loss. This is stuff like drip irrigation and whatnot, because some of their major water sources, my example is Lake Sivan. We can go back and I'll show you. Lake Sivan is that on the right. You can see that large lake in Armenia. That's Lake Sivan. It's also on the top left of this slide. That pretty picture is Lake Sivan, and as I showed before, it's bordering Azerbaijan, so a lot of that has either been taken over by Turkey or Azerbaijan throughout the years, and is not always accessible for the Armenians to use. In terms of ingredients that are commonly used, various herbs, wheat is the main grain of the area, legumes, various nuts, apricots, quince is very common, My grandmother grew up in Armenia. She loved kinsey, and it's kind of hard to find here, but you can find it if you go to like cultural markets. Plums and pomegranates. This is important to know because pomegranates are the national fruit, as well as lamb and yogurt. Lamb is the most commonly used meat of the area. So getting into my actual topic, what is lavash? Lavash is a traditional Armenian bread. It's made of yeast, flour, sugar, salt, and olive oil. Some people can put in other things like sesame seeds or herbs, but this is just to taste and what people like in theirs, but this is the traditional lavash, just has those ingredients. Many people say that it originated in Armenia, but others like to argue on a more vague level that it's just a bread of the Middle East, because other countries do eat it, but historians mostly say that it was originated in Armenia itself and then spread to these other Middle Eastern countries. It's widely known as a very flat bread, similar to a tortilla. I don't think that it tastes similar or has the same texture, but in terms of appearance, it is very similar to a tortilla. And something to know is that you do want to let it rise a little bit, so you get those air bubbles in the bread that are desired. But you don't want it to rise too much or proof too long because it does have yeast in it, and it's a flat bread, so it can't rise too much. And then it can be used for various different things like wraps and crackers and other dishes. And then something I just feel like is important to notice and I'll talk about in the history is just that these ingredients are so simple, and that can be really helpful for the Armenian culture, which I'll explain. So the history of lavash bread. It has been a staple in the Armenian diet for hundreds of years, and some people ask why, because it's just bread. Given the simple and cheap ingredients like I talked about before, lavash has been something that Armenians could make during severe economic depression. Economic depression brought on by stuff like genocide and the USSR occupancy, especially when they were independent for the first time and not receiving any funding. That was really difficult for them, and a lot of the Armenians did suffer economically, but lavash remained something that the people could make. Additionally, lavash has a really long shelf life, in fact up to 1 year, which makes it really financially attainable for most Armenians because it can hold for a long time, so it won't go bad. And it's cooked in something called a tonier, which if you see on the top right picture, that's a tonier. It's like a deep oven, but it's like a clay oven. And it's cooked in really large quantities. And the bread itself is also really large, measuring 25 to 35 inches long. As you can see on the bottom picture, you can see the bread and just see how long it is compared to most other breads. The importance of lavash bread in Armenian food culture, it's a very important part of not just like the diet, but the culture itself, which I think is really interesting. So for example, women are the ones who bake lavash, and men are the one in charge of preparing barbecue. It is actually pronounced in Armenian korovats, but it's like the skewers type of thing. That's the barbecue. And the women are the ones that bake the bread, as I said before, and it starts with the oldest woman kneading the dough, and they're given assistance from the oldest daughter and the oldest daughter-in-law. The reason for this is just to pass down the art of lavash making to younger generations so it doesn't get lost in translation. And another cultural consideration is that lavash has a ritual meaning at Armenian weddings. So this is like the groom's mother puts the lavash on the shoulders of the newlyweds. As you can see in my bottom picture, they have lavash on their shoulders, and this is supposed to symbolize prosperity and fertility. So yeah, beyond just the food itself, it does have cultural considerations to take into account, which I think is a really cool thing. And then I have my works cited page where I have all of my sources cited, and I'm just going to thank everyone for watching. I have a couple photos here of my lavash. As you can see, it's long, and then baking it, and then just some geography or pictures of Armenia to show it's such a beautiful country. So I hope everyone learned something about Armenia and some of the foods that we eat there. If you're ever interested in trying anything, we do have a little bit of Armenian food in the Bay Area, so I encourage you all to try it. Thank you.